Good afternoon. Welcome to my channel. Hi, Melanie at Create. That's what I do. And what am I talking about today? Hope all is well. Everything's good. June 11th, 2026. What is it? Thursday. I'm writing this down as I speak. Okay. So today, I want to talk about needlepoint and how I approach a project. And this is not always, but almost every project I do. This is how I'm going to approach the project, right? Because when I started this needlepoint project, and this one is on plastic canvas, it was like, how am I going to do this, right? Like, how am I going to do this for real? It's like, okay, there's the budget. First, I'd have to say what I want to needlepoint, what I want to do, right? This is my approach. Like, what do I want to do? That's probably most people's approach, right? What do I want to make, right? So there's like, I don't know, 1,000 needle points I probably want to make. But I'm like, okay, let me try to narrow it down to, my top favorites, which is like almost impossible, but I managed to, right? I managed to uh, whittle down. So I'm relatively new to needlepoint. Not really. I tried a needlepoint many years ago. I bought this kit. I think it was Dimensions was the brand. And I started needlepoint. It was wool. It was a regular canvas, cloth canvas. I don't know when this was. I don't know. Maybe early 1990s. Maybe it was late 1980s, early 1990s. And guess what? I got about maybe a third of the way through in the kit, never finished. I carried that unfinished work of needlepoint around with me for about, I don't know, I think it's about 10 years. Never finished it. Finally made the decision to just get rid of the kit. I wasn't going to finish it. So I had a little introduction to needlepoint early. I bought a commercial kit at, I think it was a store. I think it was in either Michael's or in San Francisco. Back in the day, Michael's Arts and Crafts used to have a lot more needlepoint, but I see now they're more focused on cross stitch. There's a lot more in that department. I think I bought it at Michael's. I might not have. I might have bought it a little. No, I'm pretty sure I bought it at Michael's. So anyway, so the kit was already had all the yarn that you needed, and it was wool and etc. Okay, please excuse the noise outside. If you're ever making some kind of noise of construction or something. So anyway, I never finished that kit of needlepoint. I never finished it. I'm picking up the little embroidery shreddy thingies. So many years later now, I love needlepoint, but I want to get started on a needlepoint, right? But how am I going to do this? So the first thing I really realized about this type of work, like needlepoint embroidery, this kind of work is going to grow my patience for the work, okay? I don't know if that's going to make me patient with anything else, but patience is a factor. I met a lady some years ago and she said it's a patient work. And I'm like, yeah, it really is. But I don't think patience you just naturally have per se. You have some patience. Yeah, I think we all have some patience. But growing the patience, building the patience, right? So I meet a lot of people. I'm crocheting. I've met people through the years at crocheting something, and they go, I don't have the patience for that, right? Typically, if somebody speaks with me, they just say, I don't have the patience to do that. And I say to them, I'm like, you grow the patience, right? You build your patience with these type of works. It's not like you just, I guess some few people probably just like overnight, hey, they just have the patience for this kind of work. But I think you'd start off like that, but you grow your patience with these type of works. I'm building my patience. So the the goal essentially was to be like, okay, my objective was to be like, okay, I want to do this project. It's out of a book, and there's a chart, right? And the chart, just very quickly to show you, the chart literally looks like this, okay? Like it's that tiny, okay? The little squares and everything are that tiny, all right? It's like, wow. So the first thing I needed to do was figure out how much coverage I need for the plastic canvas. I think this is close to a 12 count or 14 count plastic canvas, and there's a bigger count. Am I going to put this on cloth? Am I going to put this on plastic canvas? Since I'm relatively new to the whole embroidery floss thing with a medium like a cloth or a, so getting the supplies, right? I don't know how much I'm going to need of the supplies. There's a recommend, but I'm not using the recommended amounts and in the book, and I'm not using wool, and I'm not using a cloth canvas. I'm really like foraging into, I guess, new areas. And as far as everything I've ever seen on plastic canvas, I haven't seen this type of detail type work on plastic canvas, okay? So this is the plastic canvas, right? And it's stiff. So I was going to, so I was like, okay, do I want it to be a pillow? Do I want it to be, so I've decided, yeah, maybe I'm going to frame this or it's going to be some kind of mat. So I get started on the project, how much, and make sure I get enough of the threads to get enough coverage on the plastic canvas. La da 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 da. I'm going through all this type of things. What colors am I going to use? What am I going to start with? And this is part of that is the experiment. That's why kits are really lovely. Like if you have a kit and you know it, they're and you're following the directions of the kit, you don't have to figure all that out, which is really beautiful. Like, you know, you might want to choose, they if they give you the colors, etc., the whole bit, you don't have to figure anything of that like that out, right? So the other approach to this has been, can I read this chart? I'm, you know, working off a chart. So the needlepoint I bought before was painted. So it's already, it's, I don't know if, I think it was machine painted, however they go about that. I don't think it was an artistry paint. I've had some other needlepoint too. I've started, right? I haven't finished that as yet. That's a large project. And I think, quite honestly, it was a little above my skill level for where I need to start with needlepoint. But that's another story. So I used to post that one up, and I haven't finished that either. But I did get a kit. It was like 3 mushrooms from the Michaels, needlepoint, embroidery floss. I finished that. So what I realized in this project is, in starting, start beginner friendly, right? So am I rambling? Maybe. So I'm starting beginner friendly. So in this chart, the chart colors that are used is 5 colors. That's it. Beginner friendly. Same thing with the mushroom chart. The mushroom one I did is a kit in Michaels. Had a lot of fun doing it, but it's beginner friendly. Okay, overall. And I would say to some degree, this is somewhere in the beginner arena also, right? It looks like it's a lot more than beginner friendly, but as I'm doing more of this, I'm like, it's beginner friendly. You know, there's detail, but there's not a whole lot to really just make it difficult. So I don't have the fancy smancy computer or anything like that, maybe to translate this over to a computer where I click off. So it's going to be how to read the chart, how am I going to approach the chart, and how am I going to approach the work. Like, and this is what I find with needlepoint, which is really interesting, is that so much that it's like the continental stitch is quite frankly easy. You know, let's. I'm gonna say this: a child could do it, okay? But that's not what makes this so um, involved. When you're looking at a chart or any other needlepoint, you're like, how am I going to approach this? How am I going to approach this? Am I going to start in the center? It's continental stitch, it's not cross stitch. Am I going to start at the top? Am I going to start at the... So all of that timing, and of course for me, it's still quite a learning of like, how am I going to approach the chart? Am I doing... So the chart has little lines, darker lines that you can see. It's like 10 by 10. So I'm guessing this is like maybe 100 stitches per square, right? Then the big one, and this is the big one, all right? Am I gonna start this? What's the budget? I buy bit by bit. I buy every month, right? This ended up taking 9 strands to get a coverage, which means one full one of these plus a separated, because they come 6 threads per the whole thing, plus 3 more separated on the strand. So I'm like, okay, all right, okay, I got this. So I went to the library and I was trying to do this off my phone. I was making a lot of mistakes, taking pictures of the chart and enlarging them on my phone, camera phone. But I was like, that's not working for me. So I finally got to the library and I enlarged sections of this. I went to a printer, he enlarged some for me, and then I went to the library and I was able to spend some time on the printer and enlarging the chart. And am I going to the left? Am I going to the right? Am I going up and down? What is it? So at first, when I started this, okay, I was... Let's see if I can show you. So each of these little symbols is a color. And this one that's square is a background. It's just the background color, okay? That would be this lighter pink for me. That's the background color right there. So that's the squares that have nothing. And then the other ones are the colors. Little V's, little darker circles. There's little tiny dots. And then there's a different color to donate that. And you know, so these are just telling you what colors these are for you to use. And of course it's your choice, you know, because it's a chart, what colors you're really going to pick for your project. And so what I was doing before was trying to fill in each square line by line, right? I was making a lot of mistakes. So what I decided eventually to do was go back to just fill in one of these squares with as much of the same color, and then go to the second color, and then go to however many colors are donated in the square. And you know, that's pretty much has kept me very more or less error free in this project. So if this color is, you know, this is the darker purplish wine color, I try to do most of that before I go to the next color, if not all of it, okay, in that same square. The other thing I was trying to do with the needlepoint is conserve thread. For me, that's a mistake. It's just a mistake, okay? Trying to conserve thread with needlepoint, in my opinion, is like, depending on the design, depending on what you're doing, I guess, it could really, at least for me, this is how it's been. Trying to conserve thread. So I was going down the chart, going, okay, if I get the pink over here, and then if I don't try to get the pink over there, then I'll be able to conserve the thread. I gave up on that because all that happened was I just continued to make a lot of mistakes trying to conserve thread. And just say, okay, here's a needlepoint stitch here, there's a continental stitch there, there's one there. I'll work this section first, and then I'll go back over to this section instead of just skipping and starting the thread over there, instead of just skipping the other colors. That for me was really, I was making a lot of mistakes with that. So I just gave up on trying to conserve the thread and decided, because I'm thinking budget, and just decided it cost however much it cost. Go pick up some embroidery floss when I get low, pick up some embroidery floss every month. And this one ending up a lot pricier than I thought it would because I need nine strands to get some kind of decent coverage. So if you get a kit, you probably don't have to work that out, but you're going to probably spend some time, if you don't, if you're using canvas or anything else, working that out, right? Because these older vintage needlepoint, these are old, this is an older book, William Morris design, interpreted by some authors who went to some British castle or whatever. They are not in embroidery floss. They're in 100% wool. And I'll probably the Peruvian wool, okay, the tapestry type wool. So getting the right amount of thickness to the strands to get the coverage. And of course, I'm not working a 14 point, a 14 count, if you will. I don't think this is a 14 count. I measured it a few times, but I keep forgetting. And having to work that out. And that's going to cost, that's going to cost a little bit, and getting the right canvases and trying to figure that out. But if it doesn't work, I can pull out the embroidery thread, and if I want to, and frog the embroidery thread and use that for another project. So I guess where I'm going is, if you have a chart, and you just say you buy a book at Value Village or something, like I did, the thrift store, and you want to do the project, and you're on a budget. This is the beautiful thing about this, is that you can buy the embroidery thread as you go, but there may be a little bit of off color, a little bit of, because of the dye lot, but I'm not concerned about that. I don't care. It works for me. So I like it that way, actually. I like the yarn sometimes I like the things to have a little bit of difference, so it doesn't look to me so, I'm in pursuit of, it looks good, but it looks more character, right? Oddly enough. That's another conversation, but that's kind of where I'm at with that. So this was okay. After all of this finally is my approach. I buy the embroidery floss a bunch at a time. Nothing fancy here. It's in a plastic container. I bought the needles, figuring out my needles. I decided this size right here is the best for this project. It's the thinner, but I still use this one that's thicker too. And the chart. What I've noticed is when I go down the chart, I read the chart easier. When I go across the chart, I don't read the chart as easy, right? I don't know why that is. Maybe that's how my brain sees it. But for me, when I go down the chart, it's easier than when I go across the chart. The other thing is, when I stay more towards a consistent pattern. So in other words, if I have some needlepoint done here, but I jump down to here, and this is all empty, I'm like, where am I now? What's going on? Whereas when I just fill a block at a time, this 10 square like you see here, then it's like, okay, that part, and it's easier for me to pick back up where I'm at, okay, where I'm actually at. Before, what I was doing was kind of lining out, this square is done, and then I would line out this part, this square is done, and then it would line out, this square is done. But what I notice is, as I do the project more, and it's just easier I can follow it without not necessarily lining out each block that is done, okay? So this has been my approach to this project, right? So I started this project once before on canvas with the embroidery floss. I think it was 12 count canvas. I was like, I absolutely do not like this. But I tried, okay? I absolutely do not like this. So the first thing is, in the beginning, you're going to spend some time, at least, of course, you're going to spend some time just figuring out your colors, what you want, and, how much coverage you're going to need to get. And you may be on this another canvas, and of course, learning your tension. And this is what's lovely about the plastic canvas. This is absolutely what's lovely about the plastic canvas. There is such a thing in tension in needlepoint, right? So when you're working on the cloth canvas, your stitches can come up a lot tighter depending on your tension, and it'll be somewhat, slightly noticeable. Your stitches can be looser. So that's just with practice of like anything. But with the plastic canvas, you're pretty much going to get a consistency regardless of your tension, because for some reason that's just what that does. I think because of the stiffness of the canvas, because it's plastic, you have less what is the word? Well, the fabric is less pliable or soft, so your tension matters, and that's a practice. So if you're working on a type of a cloth canvas, you're going to work on your tension. But some of these canvases you buy in the kits or other ones I've looked at, the canvases seem pretty stiff. The canvas I had didn't seem as stiff. I was on an embroidery hoop, and my tension really struggled. So that's something for me to figure out when I go to work on a cloth canvas again, is that you need the fabric to be really stiff in order for your tension to stay consistent, right? Whether it's an embroidery hoop or a needlepoint frame, you're going to need something that really keeps your fabric stiff enough so that your tension can stay consistent. Whereas with the plastic canvas, it's always that. It's always this. It's not moving anywhere except for you're bending it. And, so even then, it's not going anywhere. So you don't have that tightness issue. I love the look more of the cloth canvas but I prefer working on the plastic, actually, as I found out. The cloth canvas gives a different look. It's a more soft, texturally, and to me, visually also. But I actually prefer working on the plastic canvas, quite frankly. Make it make sense, but that's how it is. So the next thing I try to figure out is, after all that, if any of that was cohesive and made any sense, the next thing, so I figure, if I had to say, how long did it take you to kind of get to this point before you started this, and sort of kind of figuring out how to read the chart, what works more for me, what makes more sense, what seems to make less error, I do less errors with. I'd say somewhere I have to put in a good month of that, probably. Not a full 40-hour week every week, but probably a good overall month to say, this is where I'm at with this project. This is working for me. I'm working this out. So I would say give this project a good month. Hold up, let me get the other one. Okay, so I first started this project. This is a cloth canvas. And I bought it at the Michaels. It's very soft. It frays very easily. It's not like the one I bought in the kit. I bought one with the mushrooms in the kit. I never even had to tape the sides. There was no fraying at all. So it depends on what kind of canvas you get, right? If you get a canvas that is stiffer and they've edged the sides, you'll see some canvases like that where you don't have to put any tape on there. You probably don't have to because it's not framed. But this canvas, it's very pliable. The threads move very easily. I don't know what the quality of this canvas is. I'm like, I don't, because there's different types that you can buy. But this is how I started with this project, and I was like, I I I wanted to do something to see how the green looks because I have green in my place, and I was like, I don't like it. And it's distorted also. So, you have to steam and block these, stretched. You have to steam and block and stretch these back into place. I guess you can do that with the embroidery floss, I guess, maybe. So I really didn't like the way this, you see me attempting to stop the fraying over here. And I there's, I was like, okay, but you see how it makes, and you see my tension wasn't very consistent either. If you look closely at this, you see I've had tension issues. And then I tried to put it on a embroidery hoop. I had a lot of struggles with this project. So I started like this, and I was like, actually, I started with a whole nother one before this, which was wool and acrylic. And I was like, absolutely not. I didn't like how the colors were looking. So, and some wool. Okay, so I'm testing also, I'm experimenting with different canvases and different, but if you got a nice stiff canvas at a 14 count, this would probably not be an issue. But where do you get those at? I probably online. Okay, maybe online or in some local vendor that you have there. So this should have been on an embroidery or a needle frame canvas to cut down on the distortion. And I didn't like the green on this either. I didn't like how the screen was coming up behind here. I was like, I think this could have took a way lighter green, closer to a sage color. But how colors juxtaposition against each other has a lot to do with how bright or dark the color is going to look. So I was like, this is a no. Okay. And I probably put a good couple, maybe a month into this. I don't know. I can't remember. But I was like, this is a no. So then I went to this. So you might have some time also if you're looking at a picture and you say you want to change up the colors or make it close. And the picture, it's a pillow in the book, looks very like nothing I do. Because they did shading and they have some different colors to the background, and they did some things differently. I don't have that kind of experience, quite frankly. So it's like, here is a different color. There looks like there's a different color here, and then there's another different color here. Sort of like a kind of shading in on the project. So if you look at the project, see, you look at the picture, see there's like she shaded in on the needlepoint. This is their interpretation of the William Morris originals, I guess, that was in that castle in Britain or something like that, or expensive house. So they shaded in some areas. You can see it's not necessarily lighting highlights, kind of like a highlight. So how they approach this, the needle pointing is improvisational, I would suggest. Improvisational. Unlike when you look at the chart, I'm going exactly by the chart. But when I look at how they needle pointed it, I was like, this does not match the chart. So in other words, these little sections in here should have had 2, 3 more symbols of different colors, indicating it's the same color, but you're shading in here these colors. That's not what's, see if you look, that's not what's on the chart. That is not what's on the chart at all. So when I started this, I was like, fair enough, it's their work, and I don't have an issue with that, right? It's like, it is what, that is what it is. So here they only have basically 2 colors on the chart. But here, if you look, it looks like she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, a little bit of a striation, different colors, etc. but on the chart is two colors. Okay? On the chart, this is one color. This is towards the top of that. This is one color, and this another color. Just two colors on the chart. So, obviously, this is artist interpretation, but they did offer up a chart. I'm pleased. I'm happy. It's okay with me. If I were to do this project again, right? In other words, on their pillow, they took what the word is artistic license. Okay? So they offered up the chart and interpretation of William Morris' work, but they took some artistic license. All right? When they did their work. Beautiful. No problem. I was like, it doesn't really look like, but I'm okay with the outcome from just the work of the chart. I'm totally okay with it. Okay? Oh my God, sorry about that. I just ran into it. So what I did notice on the plastic canvas, if you look at this way, working more block by block, right? So if you look through, you can see where the lines are. But I'm going to frame it or put something behind it, and they magically disappear. So here's the paper. Here's the lines you can see, and they just magically disappear. So if I frame it, or I lay it down as a mat, or I use it as a wall hanging of some sort, it will magically disappear. I was like, oh my gosh, how come it looks like that? But then I realized that can happen working on the plastic canvas. I looked at some floss tubers, and that can happen where you get this kind of striation on some kind of lines because you're working block by block. I suggest that has something to do with tension. And if you're doing any needlework, but with the plastic canvas, it may not have anything to do with tension. It might actually be the grid itself of the plastic canvas. But on for example, this is a larger coaster I've done, right? And you can see what happens. I've had once you line it up, those little things. Here's another one, right? So this is way thicker thread that I worked on for, and I haven't. You're supposed to do something with this and cover it and stuff, but I haven't done that. So I'm not concerned. It's from my place, and I don't have anybody coming over to my place going, oh, let me look behind your work there. It's just, I went to go get some felt. I was like, I didn't get, the felt was so rough. And anyway, so on this one though, this is wool and acrylics. This is a total acrylic. But with the floss, and this is plastic canvas, okay? With the floss, I notice this is what happens with the bigger piece. You get those little lines behind there, okay? So I'm not sure if that's grid of the canvas, because you see I'm working it by the blocks, by the columns, right? But with the paper underneath, so just for example, this is what it looks like. You see? Ain't that wild? But then when you put the paper underneath, it's like some magical thing happens. Like the grid lines just disappear. There's only like one line that might be showing up. I know a little bit about needlework, just a little bit. I don't know if this has to do primarily with the plastic canvas, but I know that when you work line by line, grid by grid, there's the train. Hold on. All right. When you work line by line, they're going to train in the background. Take a close look at this project. Work in progress. And the plastic canvas isn't big enough for the project. So I'm having to attach a piece of plastic canvas on, and I will have to attach one to the left, and I'm going to have to attach one on the bottom of the project. So I know, so I was saying, I know that when you work in these type of pieces, tension, your tension, okay? So when you go to pick up that line where you left off, typically you might be tighter or looser and you might make those grid lines, maybe. So I guess the recommended thing, as I've heard, is you don't work totally in grid. You don't totally work in grid. You work more like, I did a piece here and I moved this longer, and I did a square here and I moved that longer in the stitch work. So you mix up the blockiness of it. If you're showing up with that in the front of a canvas work, that is the recommended. I read that some years ago and I remembered. It's like, if you're working this square, then maybe you extend that square a little bit longer, and you work this square and you extend that a bit longer, so that you break up the possibility that you're getting grid lines. Which I'm like, I have to take the risk right now that I'm going to have grid lines because I'm not experienced enough. The train came back. The train left and then the train came back. Or did it just continue? So I'm going to clean off the table a little bit while the train, and I'm going to pause this. Okay? All right. I think the train is finished. Okay, so if you take a look. See, I got a project working on right now. So there's the strings hanging. Okay? Those are hanging strings from my curtains to be. That's a work in progress. All right? And this is a tablecloth. And that's also a work in progress. And a lot of times sometimes I'll put work up that is in progress. Here come a train again. My goodness, would the train ever stop? Okay, so it's an overcast day here. And I haven't put any artificial light, but I do have my curtains up, okay? I have my window, I haven't put any artificial light, okay? So it's a little bit darker, it's a moodier video, and this is where this project is. Hope I'm moving slow enough. Yes, I made it to the Due West Festival. It's fantastic. I will be posting some pictures of the festival. I videotaped, but I was getting way too many people's faces on camera because of how crowded it was. So I decided I'll just snap some pictures, get some pictures off the video, and that's what I'll post. I was like a little concerned about that. Like, I mean, I have some big time close-ups of people's faces, and it was like, ugh. And I'm not going to edit the video. I was thinking about trying to get a photo editor that was more advanced, but I'm like, I don't think so. I'll just post up some pictures. So here is the work so far. Work in progress, June 11th, 2026. Okay. So the next approach after all of that, so let's call that a month, maybe, hey, maybe you're experimenting, you're figuring something out, maybe you're doing all that, or, you just got a kit, and maybe you have a kit, you bought a kit somewhere from artists, and then you went and got all the yarns and everything, okay? I didn't go with anything more than 5 colors because I had a little experience before. We're trying to go with a bunch of colors, and I was like, oh, Lord, move, do. So, we're not fancy here. Okay, it's Tupperware from the dollar store. When I split threads, they look something like this usually, or I'll leave the threads on my on my table, to use. That's That's pretty much it. So the next thing I determine is first things first. Next things, well, it's not really first things first, but it's more like the age old thing about projects: start and finish. Big time. Like when majority of people, you speak with or talk to or you see on YouTube or whatever it is, most of the time this is a huge issue for people. Whether it's home projects, whether you're renovating a bathroom, whether you're doing a makeover, whether you're a potter or a painter or anything, anything at all, the finish, the start and the finish. The start and the finish is huge, right? So you're like, oh, but to get started, yeah, it's to get started, oddly enough. But I'm going to suggest that getting started is probably easier than the finish, than the completion, okay? It's probably easier. And so, what, and this one's huge for me. This is a very big project for me, okay? It's only 5 colors, but it's about a 14 by 16 piece, 14 inches by 16 inches, and it's a pretty big project. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for me, right? Okay. It's not a huge challenge, but it's a challenge. I haven't been known to finish too many needlepoint projects. So far, I think one. I've completed one, and these very small projects, okay? These very small ones. So I'm on that journey right now. I love needlepoint. I love it. I love needlepoint. I love embroidery. But just to get the work finished. So something with just these 5 colors where there's not a whole lot of rows and rows and rows of the same color, I'm like, perfect for me, because that's going to bore me and I might have a big problem finishing that for something this big. So it's like, okay, looks like it has enough color. So recommending that if you're picking out something, there's enough interest. If there's too much background that's all the same color, you might struggle to finish it. You get bored. But then again, might be your part. That might be what relaxes you. You never know, right? That might be like, yeah, I just love sitting there and needlepointing that same color over and over and over, because maybe that's your de-stressor or something. For me, typically, it's boring. Like at some point, I'm gonna go, nope, I'm done. So for this big of a project, this is where I'm starting. I cannot remember when I started this project. I have not stayed at this project every day, okay? I have other projects I'm doing. The next thing I do, looking at the chart, is I counted these squares all the way down. I think, yeah, I did. And I think it's like 16 squares down, 14 squares across, okay? If I have my math right, 14 by 16 is, I went to the calculator, is 224 stitches, okay? It's 224. And I divided that by the average month, which is 30 days, right? So I'm like, if I do a square, just one square a day, this is a 7 to 8 month project, okay? If my math is right, because I don't know, my math questionable at times, but I counted these right, and I counted across each of these little squares, and I think it's 100 stitches a square, maybe. Yeah, I think this is 100 stitches a square. And if I do one square a day, just one square a day, it's 7.6 something. It's an 8 month project. If I do 2 squares a day, it's a 4 month project. And this is how I approach things. If I'm staying consistent enough to the project, okay? If. I mean, if, okay? If. So let's say I took a month or two playing around with the colors, the green thing, da 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 da, figuring out the canvas, etc. So, I didn't say every day I went out figuring out the canvas, but just overall a month or two. Okay, next month is my budget. Let me let me try this, let me try that. Because this is 9 per threads per stitch, it's working out to be a way more costly than I had wanted it to, but it's worth it to me because I just budget over time, and if the dye lot isn't exactly the same, even though it's the same color number of embroidery floss, I'm okay with that. No problem for me. So this is how I approach my fair share of projects. Like if I'm crocheting a row for a project and it's a sweater, I will usually time a couple of rows or time 3 or 4 rows that I've crocheted, and then I get a general idea of how long the project's going to take me. That part for me, and I suggest for anyone, if you thinking you can't, you don't have the patience, you may not finish, then kind of figure out some type of, in general, formula, maybe, if you like, to just give you a reality, right? For me, that's what that is. What's the reality here? What is the reality, right? I can sit there and look at the project and go, oh my God, it's going to take me a couple of years. And that's not true at all. I've done it, I know. All right. And I think a lot of people do that. They go, this is such a huge project, it's daunting. I'm like, it's not daunting. Well, it could be. It could be. Depends on your state of mind. But if you get a reality formula, if you will, then you're like, okay, oh, well, this project is gonna, if I do 2 squares a day, it's only a 4.5 month project. And I'm like, yeah. So if my math is right, which I think it is. So for example, let's say you're a busy person, right? I don't have a job. Okay. I don't go to employment. So this is like, but I used to for many years. And if I had to say, looking back, I thought more and applied that type of discipline more, um, you know, I'd have probably been doing needlepoint for years. I probably have like 35 needlepoint pieces by now because I ain't young, okay? So it's like, and I could have probably by at that point been into like maybe 10, 15 threads of and working with different colors, but that's the experience, right? And you build to those kind of projects where you have 10 colors, 15 colors, whatever, if you're approaching needlepoint the way I am, right? And maybe even with kits also, it's something to build to, because you build up that patience and the consistency, and if you will, the discipline or the persistence. So, but hey, it's yet to be seen. Am I finishing this project? Okay. you know, I'm just saying. So, here, so with this, but I have other projects I'm doing. But let's say you're a busy person. Back to what I was saying. What was I saying? Let's say you're a busy person. You have, well, I'm not busy. It's just that your time is more, has more borders on your time, like you got to go to work or you got children or whatever, right? Or let's say you don't have that, but you have other projects, you just have other things doing. Then each square is different. So each square may not take you the exact amount of time. But what I notice is where you have larger blocks of one color, it goes quicker. So needle pointing the square goes a lot quicker. Unlike if you have a square that has 4 or 5 or 6 colors, we have to count through each color, then that goes quite a bit slower. Okay, so if you say you started here, like I did, and of the corner of the, and you go, okay, if something like this is gonna maybe take me an hour. Okay, so what I would do is I would go ahead and put something like this. Let me take you because it's got three colors in there, right? And something like this has 1, 2, 3, and 4 colors in there. So it's going to take longer. But if you have an hour a day, you can probably get a square done. Okay? And depending on how quickly you read the chart and how you get your method of how you work your pieces and etc. There was before what I was doing, excuse my hands, what I was doing was I was making each strand, and I'd make a bunch of strands ready to just be threaded. So when I run out of the thread while I'm needle pointing, I just grab another strand because I've already done separated one of the strands, put in this other, and I have a bunch of them just laying down so I don't have to interrupt to go, okay, let me pull another piece, add another 3 strands, thread it, etc. Um, so I think the more needles you have, and if you want to do something like that, you can be like, okay, I that's going to take time to create every strand first, at least for that time you're working on the project, and that way you're not constantly threading and you're not constantly having to separate strands all through. You can do it first, then you just have that kind of more consistent, or that more of that consistent rhythm. But I stopped doing that. I just thread them each time now. That's another part about this. But you know, when I first started doing the needlepoint again, I was that little annoyance came up, like, oh, I gotta keep threading the needles, right? And separating the strands and threading the needles. But because I seed bead weave, you have to constantly thread the needles. Have some patience for that, you know. Not as much as I would like to, but I do have some patience for that. Where I'm like, okay, you gotta stop and thread. You gotta stop and thread. You have to stop and thread. So ideally, that's about it, right? But let's say you've made a different decision, right? And you take a piece out of a needlepoint, and you don't take the whole thing. And you say, I really like this part where this is going to be a full flower here. And I really like this part, but I don't this look like a dude or a lady? Like, here's the arms, there's the legs, there's the, let's say you don't want this part. Let's say you don't want him and you've just decided something different. And you're like, okay, I'm going to take this project from here down, right? So you're going to have, fold the chart or cut that part out, and then you're going to go through and go to the other part, which I haven't finished yet. And as you can see, and I'm like, yeah, then you're cutting down way more of your time. Like, absolutely, way more of your time is being, you know, taken from the project, because you're only taking out the parts you want to do. So those possibilities exist too. And you see, these are different colors. And what happened with this is I picked up the embroidery thread, but I picked up the wrong color of this particular uh, shade. And I was like, you know what? I prefer it. I absolutely prefer it. I think it needs some, um, I like more that these are different shades. It looks a little bit more like how it should be, if you will. Kind of in that odd sort of off type of way, a kind of different kind of way that I actually like. Oddly enough, when I was younger, I would have been like, oh my God, this is not right, and it's absolutely not going to happen, and da 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 da, But now I'm in, more towards, yeah, I think it needs some happy mistakes. I think some projects need some happy mistakes, and not the happy mistakes that don't look like mistakes. Happy mistakes that look like the character. It just kind of moves within the character of the piece or the project. It's hard to explain what I'm trying to say about that. It looks like it's some imperfections, but at the same time, I don't want it to look like deliberate imperfections. I'm chasing this kind of thing right now with, um, it's a perfection, but it's imperfect. It's kind of that. It's like an old piece of vintage furniture, uh, that type of thing, where it has, little dents in the nicks, maybe in the furniture, and it just doesn't look like it's straight up cut by machine or something. So, and you can see I have some errors. Some things I'm gonna go back and maybe I pull that out and look at it. So yeah, that's my long, drawn out. Hope you could go with me on that. And this is the updated. This is the work in progress. This is where I'm at with this project right now. I have canvas that I'm gonna add here that I've already bought, right? That I have to add here. And that's been definitely a trial and error. And it's gonna give a little bit of a raised look, but overall I think it's working out okay. This goes all the way to here, and I have a section probably of about this much canvas to attach here. Just how big this is. So yeah, all right. No visual on me today. Having my coffee, trying to figure out my day. Got up late, overcast day here, hot, kind of muggy, but rainy. It rained last night, Toronto, Canada. Hope you're enjoying your summer. My goodness, I really hope you're enjoying your summer. Taste of the Junction last weekend in June, 11 a.m. to 7. If you're local, the Caribbean Festival, not Caravana, next month down by the harbor front. If you're local in Toronto, Canada, or you're visiting, or you do come up to Canada just to kick it and have fun in the summertime, because Toronto is pretty amazing in the summertime. I will tell you that much. All right, bye for now. God bless. May the universe take good care of you. And, what they say? And whatever that is for you, Allah, Buddha, etc. All right, bye for now.